Thank you everyone for being here today. We greatly appreciate your time. And I think luckily we're all more patient and understanding with other stuff going on and, having to get settled for a second. So as everyone starts logging in, we are thrilled to be here with you today, especially at the start of what I hope is a good summer for you all. And we are going to be talking about how to update your resume, especially like post-COVID job searching. And I know that we're not completely out of the woods with COVID, but obviously so many things have changed as a result of that. People have been furloughed, laid off, some of their projects weren't completed during COVID, etc. So what we're going to be talking about today is your what we call resilience resume and how to demonstrate to employers that you're able to be adaptable, flexible, and how resilient you were during these crazy times that we've all been experiencing in the past several years. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all today, and we really appreciate your time. We are recording today, and you will receive a copy of that recording just as a quick reminder. So my name is Hallie Crawford. I am a certified career coach, speaker, and author. And I've been coaching for just over 22 years now. There's a lot more gray hair going on back underneath here. I was lucky to find my career path and passion in my late 20s and have been coaching and training ever since then. I have an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University and a graduate degree from the University of Illinois, and have been a proud partner with TCU and the Alumni Career Center, et cetera, for several years. So I love assisting alumni with all the different topics that we present on. The advice that we are going to be giving you today is advice that we give to our clients, because we understand that updating your resume, your cover letter, LinkedIn, all of this kind of stuff can be very overwhelming for people. And some of us can feel like the woman in the image on this screen. It's overwhelming because some of us feel like, gosh, I just don't even know where to start. And I'm just going to go back to doing something else versus focusing on my resume because it is so overwhelming. Some people aren't sure what kind of formatting to use. Some people don't know exactly what to include on their resume and if they should put everything on there or just the things that are relevant. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. And some people understandably feel like, gosh, I'm not a good writer. So how do I present myself effectively, etc. And that's why we're here today, to help you navigate all of this. And we'll go through each step to kind of help you figure out and get past all of those different obstacles. Then you overlay the impact of COVID-19. Some of our projects were put on hold. Some people out there were furloughed or laid off. And some people, a lot of our clients actually that are coming to us, are either looking for something like that's part-time or a side gig or even like full-time work, but where it's completely remote. So there's lots of different things now too that we're considering with our resumes, and what do we include where and how do we deal with, I want to ask them or I want to just apply for remote jobs. How do I work that out? And do I say something about that on my resume, etc. So a lot more things have become more complicated due to COVID-19, understandably. And it's really important, I think, as we all know, to present yourself in the best light on your resume, because employers and recruiters only spend like 10 to 15 seconds at the very beginning scanning a resume to decide whether they want to look further and, speak with that person in an interview. And an average job opening is going to get a lot of applications. I think the job market is still very good now. I think we're still in the Great Resignation, at least to a certain extent. It's kind of winding down a little bit, but the economy is still pretty good. And I think it's a really good job market and will be for at least several more months. So it's really important to make sure that you stand out from the crowd when they're scanning your resume, and demonstrate to them why, they should want to talk to you a little bit further. So this is why, it's so incredibly important. And it's also really important as part of your resume and your LinkedIn profile and everything else, make sure that the rest of your social media and any other place that you're out there online is cleaned up, because those applicant tracking systems will boot you out of the system when you're trying to apply online for a job based on your resume. And as we all know, we've experienced before, me too, when you send in your resume and you never hear back. It's like this black hole of the HR department. Not that many people get an interview in the first place. So really, really important to consider what we're talking about today. These are the 5 things on this first slide here, or the next slide, for our agenda that we're going to be talking about today. We'll talk about formatting and some of our suggestions and ideas for how you can stand out from the crowd. We'll talk about branding yourself effectively, the importance of having a profile summary and what we mean by that, making sure that everything on your resume is completely relevant to the job that you are applying to. Yes, you want to tailor your resume to every single job and change it and adjust it a little bit. And then finally, how do we deal with our employment history? What do we put on there? What do we not? And how do we sell ourselves effectively there too? For a copy of the presentation, in addition to receiving the recording, which you will receive automatically, just as a reminder, you can email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to share that with you. And just by the way, too, we will have Q&A at the end of our presentation today. And we've got a few polls that we're going to do kind of as we go too. So let's go ahead and dive in. The 3 criteria as you're working on your resume and getting it closer to a final draft, the 3 kind of criteria, if you will, that you can use to get a sense of if your resume is now in a good place, is if you can say to yourself effectively, or honestly, I guess, if you will, that it sells you effectively, it brands you effectively, and that it makes you feel more confident in your job search. And the kind of the difference I would say between selling you and branding you, and I just want to like pause on this for a second because it's really important. The selling you part of your resume should be that you're explaining to them, you know, that you've got this certain type of experience and these strengths and these skills or this experience that's relevant to their job. But the difference between that and branding you effectively is the branding piece of it is kind of like that you're painting the picture of who you are as a professional. And that's also why they should talk to you as well. So it would be like a combination of your unique selling points. So for example, a nurse, let's say, who has worked overseas and also has experience in a specific area of expertise, that would be that person's brand. It's kind of like what people would say about you when you left the room, or what your coworkers would say about you if someone was asking them about you. So there is a little bit of a difference between selling yourself and branding yourself. And the branding part of it, we find with our clients, is something that a lot of people will miss. They're not putting at the very top exactly who they are and what type of job they're going for. Like, so for example, they're a project manager and it says that at the top, or they're a financial analyst. Okay, so we'll show you what this means as we go, but it is one of the common mistakes that we find when people are updating their resume. So it's really important at the very top to say, okay, this is who you are. So I would say at the top, for example, certified career coach. So let's take a look at our first step here. And this is the formatting, and we'll talk about the branding kind of as we go with each of these steps too. So formatting, I know some people sometimes will think, well, that's kind of the fluffy part. Does the formatting really matter? It's more important that, you know, I use the right language, I have the right keywords, etc. And that is all true. But formatting is becoming more and more important, I think, and relevant these days, because again, like, people's attention span is short, and we want your resume to be eye-catching, but also to be easy to read so that it stands out from other people's resume that are applying for the same job, but also so that someone scanning it really quickly can get a clear sense of what you bring to the table and then decide whether to bring you in for an interview. So a couple of, on the next few slides here, I'll just share with you kind of overview a couple of formatting things. And I know this is fuzzy, and it's okay that it is, because it's more about certain things on this resume that we want to show you. So these days, just FYI, we do recommend using a little bit of color on your resume, and it's okay to use a little bit of shading. We don't recommend more than like 2 colors. We prefer like 1 or 2, and it could be something like a deep red or a blue. That's normally what we find is the most common. But there are ways that you can, again, help yourself stand out from the crowd by putting your different headers in a color that matches with your name at the top. This person used their initials over here. And you can use some shading in the background too. The formatting does make a difference, and we would recommend that you try and kind of play around with some different formatting ideas. Again, to help you stand out from the crowd, this resume is going to be much more memorable than another one that has no color, shading, different sections, etc. Okay. So there are certain things when you're thinking about formatting your resume that you want to make sure you avoid, and also kind of put in place the opposite of these things, obviously. So some of the things to avoid is having too many font styles. You want to stick with either 1 or 2 throughout your whole resume. You want to make sure that the layout is consistent throughout so that people understand what they're reading. Okay, this is part of their experience, etc. You want to make sure that there's enough white space on your resume, that the margins aren't too small. And you want to be careful also when you're applying for a job online and you're concerned about the applicant tracking system scanners. You do not want to put underlining on your resume, and you also don't want to have tables in there or columns, because those can trip up the applicant tracking systems a little bit. You can use bulleted lists, and you can use like longer lists of things separated by a comma or a dash or something like that to create things that are more visually appealing. But you do want to be careful about these things at the bottom because they can kind of trip up the scanners. When you're applying online, and also if you are emailing your resume to a recruiter or a hiring manager, you want to make sure that you translate it from Word, for example, into a PDF. Okay. A PDF will hold the formatting. If you send it to someone in Word and they open it up and they have a different version of Word, it's going to look different. The formatting is going to be all over the place. Okay. You can have 2 different versions. If you look on the left-hand side of this slide, you can have 2 different kind of versions of your resume. One that is a little bit fancier and it has the color, etc., for interviews and networking. And when you're applying online, if you're able to upload your resume. But you can also have a plain kind of text only version, because as we all know, when we're applying online, sometimes they want you to put the text like inside of a box on their application screen. And as we've all experienced before, when you copy and paste it, the formatting can get all messed up too. So it's okay to have kind of 2 versions, plain text for one that you can just kind of copy and paste there. You do want to be careful with the formatting about not overusing bold, italics, or capitalization. And we talked already about using color and having like a bolder kind of header that stands out. One of the things from this slide before we move to a second example of another way that you could format your resume is we do find that people capitalize too many things. So be mindful of that, because it almost starts to look like if you're capitalizing things that actually are not proper nouns or don't need to be capitalized necessarily, it can start to look like it's an error on your part or a typing, a typo or a mistake that way too. So go through your resume and make sure that only the things that really need to be and should be capitalized are that way. People get a little excited about capitalization. This is another example of a second way to format your resume too. This one is a little less jazzy and exciting than the other one, and I'll say something about that right now. Is the other one that we showed you was more of a sales and like communication professional. And we would say that understandably certain industries are a little bit more formal and traditional than others. So you can veer towards something like the one in red that we just showed you a couple minutes ago, that for something that is a little bit more creative, like a design field, or one that, someone who's in technology or in sales like that. If you're in a field that's a little bit more standard or traditional, you could use a variation of what we're showing on the screen. And the whole point of showing this one is mostly to say, you can also use or show you that you can also kind of have color behind each of your headings as well as another way to handle things too. Okay, so the formatting, lots of different ways to play around with things. You can look for different formatting templates for resumes online to get some different ideas. We have about 4 or 5 resume templates that we provide to our clients that they can kind of pick and choose from. And sometimes what people will do is they'll get formatting ideas from different suggestions and kind of incorporate different things. Um, a couple of things that we would suggest as part of the formatting with your resume as well is you could include excerpts of testimonials from your LinkedIn profile or that you've gathered from people over the years inside of your experience section. You could just put it at the very bottom of your experience and put it in italics. If you're going to do that, we definitely recommend shortening it so that it's not this, very long-winded thing, but it's a third-party endorsement that you could add onto your resume that could help you stand out. And it's a great idea as part of your resilience resume. We are having clients start to put down skills and strengths that they demonstrated during COVID that were really valuable. Like one person, for example, was able to move his team from solely in person over to completely remote in like 5 days. And he put that on his resume as one of his top skills. So these skills that we've all learned or had to learn during COVID of flexibility and being able to lead or work remotely, being able to work with a team collaboratively, kind of online, but also in person in a hybrid format. These are things that we would recommend starting to highlight more than we would have in the past on your resume because they are relevant during these times. The workplace has completely changed, and I don't think it will ever go back to exactly the same as it was before. So when you're considering updating your resume to be more COVID relevant, so to speak, you want to think about, okay, what were the skills that I either have learned or was able to demonstrate during COVID that, current employers are going to be mindful of and they're going to value. And I gave you some examples just a second ago, kind of as we were talking about this. And it could be different depending on your situation, but definitely put those at the top in your professional profile, which we will talk about as we continue here. Step number 2, let's talk about branding next. So after you've started to consider and thought about how can I jazz up my resume a little bit more in terms of the formatting and also in terms of the sections that we want you to have on your resume, it's next really important to think about selling yourself effectively, as we said, and branding yourself as effectively too. And I'll show you, kind of give you a quick example here. So you want to think about your resume as your own personal marketing document. And in a sense, your name is your brand. And this is one example here. And we would not say that everyone has to do something like this necessarily, but it just gives you a really good idea about, or kind of some suggestions to consider with what you could do with the header at the very top of your resume. So I'll walk through this just for a minute because it's important. So your full name at the top. Some people will put their middle initial, especially if you Google yourself and you find that for example, there are other people out there with your same name and, there's content out there about them that is not the content that you want people to see or whatever. If your name is more common, you may want to put your middle initial. It's not a requirement. That's just a thought. In some cases, if your degree, whether it's a PhD or an MBA, is highly relevant to the jobs that you're applying to, we would recommend putting it up at the top in your header here, just like this. Your city and state and zip code are now becoming more optional, especially since we're working remotely. If you're applying for jobs in person and they're local and you really want to let them know that you are local to the area, especially if your area code kind of is a different one elsewhere from where you're living, it's okay to put this, your location, but you do not have to these days. It is important to put obviously your phone number, email, as well as your LinkedIn profile. We want you to have your LinkedIn profile in your header. And this person in particular, put who she is, like the types of jobs she'd be looking for. She's a coach, she's a facilitator. This is kind of like some of the keywords that she would be wanting employers to pay attention to and notice as her key strengths, if you will. And then she's got this really great tagline here too. So we would recommend something like this, even if it's not this visually appealing. You want to make your header stand out for the jobs that you're looking for. So I am curious with this poll, and Terrence, I wasn't sure, do we have polls launched today, or should we do these just like in the chat box? I'm fine with either, no worries.
Yeah, Hallie, I think we're good to go to do it as we planned. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. We're very curious if any of you, and I'm sure some people do, but who out there has a header on their resume that brands them? Okay, good. We've got one person raising their hand. That's probably a yes. We'll take a look at this. And it's okay if the question is no, because we understand that's why you're here today or part of it. So it's all good. All right. Okay, we've got almost 100%, or 8. Yay, everybody answered. So we'll end the poll and we'll share the results. We've got 92% are saying no. Understandably, that's why you're here. 8% are saying yes. So for those of you who have one, there may be some things that you want to tweak and change just a little bit. And those of you who do not, this gives you some ideas about what you can do based on the examples that we've shared with you so far, and having a tagline and that kind of thing at the top, again, will help brand you more effectively, okay? When you're thinking about your profile summary, which we're actually going to talk about starting in the next slide here, but when you're thinking about your tagline as well as your profile summary, okay? And what we mean by this is you don't want to just start launching into your experience right at the beginning of your resume. We really like for people to have like a very quick kind of like profile summary paragraph about who they are and why they want, why they're qualified for the job. But it's a great idea to have as part of this summary and your tagline at the top, your unique selling points. Again, that unique combination of skills and strengths and experience that you have that the other people applying for this type of job may not have. So think about how you stand out from the crowd against your peers, so to speak, and competition. You also want to include in your summary and throughout your resume soft skills as well as technical skills. So it is really important to be able to say to the employer, I know this kind of software, I have this kind of experience, et cetera. That's critically important because obviously, that's why they're going to be hiring you. But we also want you to put some soft skills in there too, meaning if you have great leadership strengths and skills, if you are very detail oriented, if you're great at leading your teams or, managing projects because you tend to be the type of person who's really extroverted and you can communicate well with people. Those are the types of things that can help kind of tip the scales in your favor. And we talked about this already a little bit with the COVID related skills. A lot of those things are going to be soft skills, and they are just as valuable, if not more valuable in some cases, than your hard skills and your technical skills. So we want you to include those as well. And then finally, when you're thinking about your professional profile section and also, your tagline, if you will, you can think about, okay, if someone were to interview, my peers, my boss from my current boss from my previous jobs, what was I known for? Even going through some of your performance reviews. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Your performance reviews from past jobs, that can help you get some ideas of what your branding is, okay? Let's talk about your profile summary. And this is step number 3. This is the third thing you want to be thinking about, because this one is really, really critical and important. And also we find that not enough people have a profile summary at the top. This is different than an objective statement. And we actually do not like objective statements necessarily. We would rather you sell yourself effectively at the top of your resume versus using kind of what we would call precious real estate on your resume, just talking about, okay, I'm looking for this type of job. They know what type of job you're looking for because you're applying for their position. So we want you to have a summary that answers these kinds of questions. So if you put yourself in the employer's shoes, why should they be reading this? What skills do you bring to the table? And what value do you have? You want your profile summary to kind of answer those questions. And you do want to have for sure in your experience section, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen here, your measurable results. So numbers, percentages, results that you've achieved, what made a difference to that employer from you being there in that job, and also include your most impressive relevant accomplishments. In your profile summary, you can include a couple of results and include a couple of numbers, but you want to save some for your experience section. So you want to maybe sprinkle a couple of results in there that are your most impressive relevant accomplishments to that job. And then the rest of those results could be listed in your experience section. But if there's anything that is just like incredibly impressive that would be really, really valuable and impressive to that particular employer for that specific job, it's okay to put it up in your profile summary, and we would suggest that. There are two different ways to write your profile summary. It can be in simple paragraph form, which you saw on some of our other examples earlier, or you can separate it out. And I'll give you another example here on this next slide. You can separate it out based on skills and strengths. And there's two examples here. So if you are an adept multitasker, and that is really relevant to the job that you're applying to because it's a project or program management type of job, this is an example of something you can use. You want to use very active, action-oriented verbs. And for example, at the bottom of this one, when they're talking about complexity, process flow, and person hours required, that would be specific to the type of job that you're applying to. If that's not going to be relevant for the specific job you're going for in that particular resume or application, you leave that part out. So this is where you want to adjust your resume for each job. You can have some kind of standard things that you would say and would make the most sense in general for most employers. But then you can kind of play around with the order of the words and the skills that you're putting in there, as well as change up kind of the language a little bit based on what the job description says. And then there's another example here on the right with writing skills, okay? So this is one way that you can present your profile summary. And an example of this is on this next slide. So when we're talking about, let me see if I can bring my cursor over here. I keep getting the direction of it wrong. So thanks for your patience, everybody. The profile summary, what we're talking about here is this section here. So if you take a look at this example, this one is a little bit plainer, and he needs to put his LinkedIn profile here at the top. But if you notice, look, he's branded right away. You know who this person is right out of the box. And that's what we're talking about when we want you to brand your resume. This header should be something that is true to who you are and what your expertise is and your experience, but you can also adjust it a little bit to better fit the job title that you're applying to too. So this person most likely is applying for jobs where he's a marketing and communication strategist. It could be that he's a director, so he could change out strategist with director, or it could be more of a coordinator position. So the strategist could be, kind of a variation on different things. And for example, if he's applying for a job that has a little bit less of the communications in it, he might just say marketing strategist instead and drop that part. Again, you can't lie on your resume. It needs to be something that is honest and truthful for your situation and your experience and expertise, but you can adjust this header a little bit based on the job you're applying to. Then he's got a few keywords here. This is what we would consider like a tagline, if you will. His professional profile is here, separated by keywords that he wants to stand out the most. And then underneath here, which we would recommend using a format that is at least somewhat similar to this, meaning in terms of the sections of it, you've got a profile and then you also have a skills section, whether it's on the far left, like it was in the other example at the beginning, or if it's here, okay? So the professional profile is what we're talking about here. And we like the idea of separating it out like this with certain keywords because it really draws your eye and it helps kind of hit home with the person that's reading like, oh yeah, okay, these are the skills and strengths. that I'm looking for. So I know we've shared some different formats here and explained some of the different sections that we have. If anyone feels like they need a little bit of help with their formatting or their language or anything else, we always offer a free strategy session to our TCU alumni, gives you some advice, and you can learn a little bit more about our services. You would just email us at admin@hollycrawford.com if you feel like you need more help. Let's talk next about relevance. And this one is really, really important because we find too, if we're kind of going through the most common mistakes that we find with our clients, this relevance thing is one of the things that people do make a lot of mistakes on. They get so excited, understandably, or feel really strongly about their experience, which we totally get. But sometimes there are certain things that they really want to put in their resume because, for example, they're incredibly proud of it and they think it's really unique, etc. But sometimes we might tell them it's not really relevant for this job. And we are always concerned if you put things in there, even if you're really proud of them and excited about them, we get that. But if they're not going to be relevant to the position, you want to think about the employer or recruiter who is reading your resume is kind of like they're developing or painting a picture of who you are in their mind in a couple of split seconds. And if you put something on there, for example, if you're, a financial analyst, and you had some experience in the past for whatever reason, this is kind of a silly example, I think, but anyway, with like event planning or something like that, because you had to, help with events with one of your past organizations. If that particular position has nothing to do with event planning, or that's not one of the requirements, the employer is going to say, oh, this person is looking for something different. They're not as relevant as I thought, and they're going to move on to the next person. So really be tough on the relevance piece of it when you're putting your resume together. It should not be one size fits all. It really should be tailored to each position. You want to make sure you're highlighting the relevant skills and expertise, as we've said, only the ones that are relevant. Take the ones out that are not going to be as relevant because it's a story that you're telling and you want to stay on message. You want to include quantifiable results as much as you possibly can for your skills and experience. And before we do this next poll here, and I'll explain what we're saying too about a master resume, a couple of things related to the tailoring of your resume and the quantifiable results. So the first thing is an example that I'll give you from one of our clients to kind of show you how easy it ought to be in an ideal world to tailor your resume so you don't feel like you're recreating your resume every single time you're applying for a job. We had a client who was in corporate, she was in charge of making sure that it was corporate fraud and investigation, basically, and making sure that other organizations weren't like copying her company's logo, those types of things. And at the organization where she was when she first started working with us, she actually had to go out, and to a certain extent, it wasn't just managing the fraud. She had to go out and kind of investigate it, or her team did. And they were in charge of like just kind of scouring the internet and paying attention to if there was any fraud kind of happening related to, she actually worked at Coca-Cola at the time. So obviously a really big organization. She was looking to apply to a job in Texas at a different type of organization within a different industry. And it was, instead of the investigation piece though, it was more about managing the corporate whistleblowing program. So if there was a problem with fraud, it was external, that kind of thing. She was supposed to manage that program and handle those complaints or, those concerns that were brought up. So there was no investigation in the new job that she was looking at. So every place on her resume where it said that, she would either drop the word investigation or change the word to program management, because that was honest and true. She had done that in the past, but also because that was going to be more relevant for that job. So you can see how if you get your resume into a really good spot and you've got all of the content on there that you could possibly use for the majority of the jobs that you're looking for, then in an ideal world, tailoring it for each job should just be a matter of changing the order of some of your different, skills and strengths, some of the different language and verbiage, or some of your bullet points, dropping some of the words and inserting something different. And the second thing that we wanted to say about this quantifiable results is we realize that not everyone has the type of job where there's going to be quantifiable results in terms of numbers. Not everyone is in sales or marketing where we can assign numbers to things. You can still speak in language that is as results oriented as possible. So quick example, if you were the office manager for a very large doctor's office, let's say, and there is, at one point they asked you to redesign the waiting room and the check-in process for getting in to see their doctor. And even if they didn't track the improvement there as much as they could have, if you knew for a fact that that increased or improved or made the process more efficient and the doctors were able to see more patients as a result, you can write that out and put that on your resume and just say that, even if you don't have the numbers. Explain and say that the check-in process was improved, resulting in, doctors being able to see more patients every day, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the idea for our next poll here of if you have one copy, a master copy of your resume that you can use for the majority of the types of jobs that you are applying for, and you create each job or each resume for a particular job from that master copy, that will help you be a lot more organized. So we always recommend having one master copy of your resume with all of the information and content on there. That is not one that you would necessarily send out to everyone because it could even have some of your notes on it about changes that you need to make for each job. But if you use that as your master version, make a copy and adjust that particular each time, adjust that particular resume each time for your different jobs, that's going to help you be more organized over time and also not forget some of the content that you might want to include. Okay, Terrence, I might need help with this one. Do we have the poll for master copy of resume, Terrence, or do we not give it to you? We might not have. And it could be me.
No, we don't have that one, Hallie, just the previous one in the LinkedIn recommendations.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so everybody, if you could put in the chat box here, if you have a master copy, just put yes or no. I really would like to hear about this. So we'll continue on. That was probably our mistake. We might not have given it to you guys, Terrence. So thanks for your patience, everybody. Go ahead and put in there yes or no, because we're really curious about that. So keep that story in mind, please, of the example that I just gave you. That is how easy it ought to be to adjust your resume, because I know a lot of people, the reason why they don't do it is it feels like a lot of work. I get it. I would feel the same way, but we want to make it as easy as possible. And it looks like people are answering, which is great. So we'll look through that when we get to our Q&A too here in just a second. Reminder really quickly, we're not going to talk a lot about this one because we already did, but these are some of the examples of those kind of COVID related strengths, if you will, that we are finding that are important to start including on your resume a little bit more. And if you look at the bottom here, the organizational skills and work ethic and those kinds of things, I know in some cases that might seem a little bit like lightweight or trite, but those are that much more important in this remote environment, because I'm sure we all know people who did really well working remotely because they're organized and they know how to create their own schedule, et cetera. And also those people that don't do as well with it. And so it is a good way to help you kind of stand out from the crowd. Let's talk about our last tip, and this is employment history, critically important piece to the whole thing. And then we'll get to our last poll here before we get to Q&A. So with your employment history, there are 3 different ways to highlight your history. And I'm sure most of you have heard of these, but chronological is the most common, where it's your experience is listed at the very top, your most relevant, your most recent experience in chronological order working backwards. That's what people will normally use. And that is the best for people who are looking for a job that is similar or the same to what they've done before, not for people who are trying to change career paths or industries. A functional resume focuses more on skills and functions. And if you're trying to change into a different industry or career path, this type of resume is a little bit more relevant for your situation. And there's also a hybrid model resume where it's a combination of the two, chronological and functional. And we'll talk about these a little bit more as we go today. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about employment history and how to deal with some of this COVID stuff. And then I will show you some how you can kind of work through chronological version of resume versus functional, et cetera. We'll get to that in just a second. If any of you on the call today were impacted in some way, shape, or form by COVID, whether it's being furloughed or laid off, or if a project was never completed, so then you don't have the results from that project, these are some of the things that you can say inside of your resume. It's okay to be pretty open and direct about it. So for example, after mentioning a marketable result for a specific position, if the department was cut or if the program wasn't continued or whatever it is, it's okay to mention what happened in your resume. And just by the way, if you were laid off or furloughed due to COVID, you can put that in your experience section as the most recent thing that happened. Or if there's any other gap in your resume, go ahead and just put that in there kind of as a placeholder, if you will. We prefer for people to have something versus nothing and just kind of a gap in time just sitting there. We like for people to say, this is what happened. You know, I took time off to spend time with my family or take care of my family or whatever it was. We prefer for people to have something versus nothing and just be direct and kind of honest about what occurred during that time and just put the dates there. Okay. A couple of other things as it relates to your employment history section. You always want to make sure that you start sentences with very active verbs, and there's some examples here on the far left. You want to make sure that your bullet points underneath your experience section are very results or accomplishment oriented. And we would recommend selecting the top like 5 to 7 accomplishments during any job that best highlight the experience or success that would be relevant to the position that you're applying to, as we said. And if you don't have 5 to 7 because you haven't been there long enough, it's okay to have like 2 or 3, whatever would be relevant, but put something there that would be accomplishment oriented and results oriented, not just a list of your tasks and responsibilities, okay? Because that doesn't answer the question, like, so what? Why should I care? So you kind of want to ask yourself with each section of your experience, when you're reading through it, does it answer like, so in a good way, the question, so what? If you said, well, I managed a team of, 5 staff members, well, for all we know, you did a terrible job doing that. We want to know that you did that effectively and you were able to coach and, grow their skill set or something like that. So put something in there that's a little bit more results oriented and kind of active. Okay. So the things that we've been talking about so far, if we shift to talking about chronological and functional resumes, okay? A chronological resume is the examples that I gave you before. Basically, all of the criteria and the sections that we've talked about so far, having a summary at the top, having a skills section next, and then having your experience listed in chronological order from the beginning to the end, and having your education and any volunteer work or leadership, conferences or anything else that you're part of at the bottom. A functional resume is similar in that you want to have your header at the top. You can still have a professional profile, and we want you to. We still want you to have a skills section there. But one way that you can handle kind of putting together or combining your experience into relevant skill sets relevant to that particular job, because you're shifting over into something that's a little bit different, is if you take a look at this slide, you can say admin assistant or project manager, and instead kind of combine all of your relevant experience. You would still put the dates there, but the dates are not going to necessarily be in chronological order. You're putting all of your admin assistant, for example, type of work or types of jobs that you've had in one header underneath. And this would be the way that you can create what would be called a functional resume. Okay, so those are kind of 2 different ways to do it. And in terms of your employment history, we talked about this just a little bit more, but if any of you do have gaps on your resume and you during that time, let's say not just took care of your family because you needed to, but maybe there was some volunteer work you did or you took an online class or something like that, we would definitely recommend putting that as well in those sections to again fill the gap, because those things not only let employers know that you were doing something during that time, but they could be really, really relevant to the particular job that you're applying to too. And finally, before we get to our Q&A, this will be our last kind of official slide before we get to taking action, and also our final poll here too. Obviously, we always want people to proofread their resume, and it's really a good idea to get a friend, former coworker, family member, etc., to help you with that. We would recommend either 11 or 12-point font. It kind of depends on which font style you're using, but just make sure it's readable. We talked about translating your resume into a PDF when you're uploading it or sending it to someone. And make sure too that when you send over a cover letter, if it's asked for an application, that it has the same header as your resume so they match, and that it has very similar formatting, okay? And it's a great idea. We talked about testimonials too. It's a great idea if you do have any testimonials to add to your resume or also your LinkedIn profile from during COVID. Like, what were you really effective at during this time? Again, to show and demonstrate that resilience. All right, so as we start to think about any questions that you have, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. We'll go ahead and launch our second and final poll here, because we would recommend too, this is not talking about resume, I realize, but it's really helpful and something that we find not enough people on LinkedIn are doing as much as we would like. It's a really good idea to start also working on getting some recommendations on your LinkedIn profile too. Employers are going to look at your LinkedIn profile, hands down. It's just becoming more and more the case. And if you can have some recommendations either placed on your resume, kind of sprinkled throughout a little bit, or your cover letter, and also even sprinkled throughout your LinkedIn profile as well, they're just fantastic. It's a third-party endorsement of your strengths, your skills, etc. And we just really want people to add that to their list too. So we've got 78% are saying 1 to 3 recommendations, 22% are saying 3 to 5, and 0 saying 5 or more. Start with 1 to 3. 1 to 3 is a really good start. If you can get up to 5 over time, that would be fantastic. That would kind of be our goal for you. Let's take a look at our next and final slide here as we move towards Q&A. We would like everyone to get out your pen and paper for just a second, write down one action step that you will take in the next week. Please feel free to share that action step in our chat box or in the Q&A. And here are some examples that we have on this next slide here. And Terrence, I feel like I can probably handle Q&A on my end if you're okay with that.
That's totally fine, Allie. Absolutely.
Okay. If you can just help me make sure I don't miss anything.
Absolutely.
Cool. Any concern about your formatting, coloring, and branding translating into grayscale or bitmap? I honestly can't say. I don't know about the bitmap thing because I'm not as tech savvy about that stuff. Please, yeah. Terrence, do you know the answer? Do you have
I
suggestions?
haven't heard of that myself, actually. I'm curious to know myself. Yeah.
I would personally, though, I wouldn't be concerned about it, because even if it turns into grayscale, that's fine. It's still shading, it's bringing things out and drawing your attention to it. So bottom line, I wouldn't worry about it. It's a great question. Any differences on a professional seeking an industry change should take when approaching branding? I would take a little bit more of the functional style of the resume, as we said. So when you're trying to brand yourself, I almost want to say, but not in a bad way, like genericize it a little bit more so that it's less industry specific and it's a little bit more about the general like strengths and skills that you have that are transferable skills. So use the functional and kind of make it just a little bit more generic so it can kind of go across the board between different industries. Hopefully that answers as a beginning. Is it better to tailor your resume for each position you're applying for? Yes, absolutely, you need to. And does that include each different company and firm? I would. You may not have to quite as much if the companies or firms are similar, but if their values are different, or if their mission is different, or the way they approach things is different, I would. I would take an extra 5 minutes, because if it can get you and land you the interview, that time is worth it. So I would definitely consider, yes, across the board, tailoring it just in case. Another question, I'm gonna get some water here. How do you add the list of skills in professional profile if you're not using a table? Yes, so what you can do is you can have it be like a long list across the page, where you use either like an up and down, kind of like vertical line, or you could use commas, or you could use like a dot or something like that. So there's ways to do it. You just have to find a way to kind of break in between the keywords. Great question. Would actively applying for jobs in person during the pandemic count as a pro or a con? Great question. These are all really good. I don't think it's a pro or a con. I think it depends on what the company is looking for, honestly. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a better answer than that. I think it really varies based on the organization, because some organizations are totally fine with, and they actually prefer remote work, and some people are wanting, people to come back in person totally. So I think this depends on the industry that you're in and the types of companies that you're applying to too. And Terrence, feel free to dive in if you've got any suggestions too. Our next question is, I'm working on an advanced degree with relevant skills for the jobs I'm applying to. And how to showcase this. I would put that like at the end of your profile at the top, and just reference it then, that you're working on this, the expected or anticipated completion date is this. But if it's relevant, it shows that, you're doing something to advance your career in this area and stuff. I would put it at the end of the profile. We have another question asking, what is a LinkedIn recommendation? When you go into your LinkedIn profile, at the very, very bottom, there is actually a section where you can get recommendations from other people and ask for those. And for example, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, it's basically LinkedIn, blah, 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 /LinkedIn or IN Hallie Crawford. You'll see them at the bottom, but just go into your profile and you'll see them at the very bottom. And they're recommendations that other people give you, testimonials of your work. Okay. Great question about cover letters. You make a new cover letter for every single job. I would use a master cover letter each time, but tailor it just like you would with your resume. So it's good to have a cover letter like template and example that you can just change up and adjust a little bit. Another question asks, or another person is asking, do I need to have the LinkedIn deactivated theirs and don't want to format and fix it up? I would say a little bit. It depends on the industry. We find like the medical profession and in some cases like elementary school and stuff like that, they don't use LinkedIn quite as much. So it does depend a little bit on the profession. However, the majority of professions and industries out there, they do use LinkedIn, and a lot. And so my answer to people is always, yes, you really do need to have one, because it makes a difference. And employers are starting to wonder sometimes why someone is not on LinkedIn. And they might even ask you that question. So you got to be prepared for an answer. Another great question is, how far back in experience should you go? Do we still keep it to 2 pages? Yes, 2 pages. And usually if experience is 10 years or older, you don't necessarily need to put it on there. So we usually have people drop it if it's more than 10 years. We've got another person commenting, which is great. I've been leading a hiring process to fill college faculty openings, and several resumes include pictures of the candidate. Do you recommend including a picture? No, we don't, because that's usually what LinkedIn is for. I don't think it's going to boot you out of the process necessarily, but we usually see resumes overseas more. it's more common to have pictures over there and a little less common in the States to have it. So I personally wouldn't use that space with it. I would have your picture be on LinkedIn instead. Another great question. This is great. And I've got about one more minute before I've got to run to my next call. How do I lessen the burden of my references since I'm applying to several jobs at the moment? Employers, should I apply to fewer jobs? No, this is a great question. I would see if you can, if there are a couple more references, maybe you can ask to help spread the burden out a little bit. And in some cases, if you could get them to either write a recommendation on LinkedIn, you could point at prospective employers to that, and they might read those instead of contacting your references all the time. Okay. Resume building tools I recommend. The only one that I would recommend, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's not a resume building tool, but it will scan your resume and your LinkedIn profile. And Terrence knows about it because he's nodding. It's jobscan.co. And Terrence, if you could put it in the chat, maybe that'd be great. That's a really good tool that will let you know if you're using the right amount of keywords on your resume and LinkedIn, and if you've got like the right content to match up with different jobs. And before we go here, a recommended page length, we would recommend 2 pages. And I want to try to help people. So almost done with my PhD, keeping going here, leave it off my resume. Yeah, I would leave your PhD off if it makes you seem overqualified, because that falls in the relevance category. That if it's not relevant, I wouldn't put it on there. References listed on your resume. No, I usually available on request. I like it that way. How much is too much on a resume in terms of experience and skills? I would keep it only to, like, if you're in that experience and skills section, I would have no more than 10 or 12, because it starts to muddy the waters over time. Okay, good. So Terrence, by the way, before we sign off, and Terrence, please feel free to say any closing remarks, has put jobscan.co in there, and it's not a typo, it is .co. And I just wanted to see here, it looks like we've got a little bit of half and half to the answers to our question about, it was the LinkedIn recommendations. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. I don't want to waste our time and take your time, Terrence, from what you want to say before we go here today. I just wanted to thank everyone so much for your time. We hope this was helpful for you. Just as a quick reminder, if you would like the slides, you can just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. And Terrence, any closing things you'd like to say?
Sure, Hallie. Thank you so much for all the resources and all the tips, Hallie. And everyone, as you know, I work in the Career Center at TCU. One of the things I love about Hallie's tips is that if you meet with Hallie or me, you're going to get the same message. It's consistent messaging, consistent strategies. We're all on the same team here. So feel free to take advantage of Hallie's services, her coaching sessions. And I'm also going to put the link to Handshake in the chat as well. If you want to meet with me for a resume review or anything career related, you can always use alumni services. All of our services are free for life. We're open during the summer, fall, and spring. So one thing I love about these sessions is it always resonates with us because we have consistent messaging. So with that being said, thank you so much for your time. And Hallie, thank you so much for being a valued partner with our Alumni Association. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Good luck, everyone. Take it step by step. I know it's a lot. Step by step.